and there are mixed expectations on the last interest rate decision to be announced later today. That says consumer price inflation has risen for a third consecutive month to 5.9% following the recent marginal declines from record highs, which prompted the Reserve Bank's aggressive repo rate hiking cycle. Joining us now for a quick discussion on what we can expect for this afternoon is Lebogang Gaoaketse from Wesbank. Lebogang, good morning to you. Let's begin with what the MPC decided to do last month, and that was to keep the rates on hold at 8.25%. That was for the month of September. Your expectations this time around?
Morning, Pauline. Thank you for having me on the show. The consumers are contending with quite a lot, so I anticipate and I predict that it will remain flat. If not for anything, to provide some confidence to consumers, because as we all know, in our current economy, we are contending with quite a lot. That's my prediction, that it will remain at 8.25%, so that everybody can, keep calm, especially heading towards the festive period.
Upside risks, i.e. inflation, which we saw come out yesterday, that now sits at 5.9%. Is that going to make the decision even tougher, perhaps to keep the rates on hold, if indeed that may have been the intention?
Look, the MPC is very strong on the contractionary policy, right? And with inflation sitting at 5.9%, we all know what the effect of that is on food and everything else that's related. You ask a very interesting question. In order to curb the demand, of course, and eventually, keep prices stable, the honorable thing to do is to keep it flat at 8.25%. It will be a tough decision because there's a lot to contend with also on their end to stabilize the economy. But of course, we will only see the effects of that at a later stage. Tough decision on their end. But they must definitely continue the contractionary policy, and we will reap the benefits much later.
I remember the Reserve Bank governor in fact, I think it was in the month of September, when he explained this very, very simply, and that is that inflation eats into our salaries. And so what keeps him awake at night is containing inflation, because for him, that has a bearing on whether the consumers can continue to take the pain. Is it likely to keep the same tone? How can he appease the day-to-day person on the streets who is desperate for a cut, perhaps?
It goes back to my initial prediction and thought. If you have friends around you and the announcement is made, the minute that people hear that it's going up, going high, they lose it. And I know friends who are literally one interest rate hike away from a mess in terms of their cost of living. So the prudent thing to do to appease the ordinary consumer on the street is to really, even if they hear that it stays stable, that for them means at least I can maintain my life the way it is right now, as opposed to trying to make amends if it increases. I say it lightly, but I know someone who rightly said that if the interest rate goes up once again, I'll probably have to forgo my house, for example. So, the prudent thing to do, keep it as flat.
The inflation story, or should we say the conversation around inflation, it does not seem that it is going to go away anytime soon. I'm saying this because the rand remains vulnerable. Then you have geopolitics, specifically in the Middle East right now. That continues to be a problem. Let's not forget that Russia-Ukraine conflict, these are going to pose a threat to those global oil prices. All of these factors combined, Lebogang, again, does that pose a risk to trying to contain inflation?
Undoubtedly, I mean, there's no doubt in saying that we are in a very constrained economy, within the bounds of South Africa. And all of those global factors that you've just listed really add pressure, because we are part of a global society. And it's quite important, to reflect on where the inflation story has been and how far it's come through, and its impact on food and oil prices and all of those things. It's a tough decision for the MPC this afternoon to make, especially given where we are right now before the festive season. I always make a joke that I used to buy, 4 juices at a specific retailer for less than 100 Rand. Now I buy 3 juices for the same price. That on its own is an indicator to the struggle that an ordinary consumer faces when it comes to the pinch that inflation has on their cost of living.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one. It's a tough balance to strike for the MPC. We understand the long-term effects, but on a day-to-day basis, it just does not make sense to the ordinary consumer.
Let's conclude the conversation by going back to the original question then, and that is whether or not the rates will remain on hold, or might there be the temptation to hike interest rates. Why am I saying this? In the last decision, it was a 3-2 split. So 3 members of the MPC deciding that we should keep the rates on hold at 8.25%. But the dissenting voices there were those 2 members who said that perhaps they would have preferred a 25 basis point hike. Might those 2 members who were outvoted in the last rates decision, might that be perhaps their time?
Look, as I said, 8.25 as it stands now is the prudent thing to do, just for stability and very ready to keep calm. The worst that can happen is a 25 basis point hike, for reasons that we've discussed, to contain the demand so that we eventually see a positive impact on food price increases and CPI, because in the long term, that is the story that we all want to hear. We all want to hear that food will be more affordable, the cost of living will be more affordable, I'll be able to afford my car installment better, and so on and so forth. I'm sticking to my guns, 8.25. I'm part of the 3. Yeah, I really am, for my sake as well, as an ordinary consumer. But let's see. Yeah. We hope for the best. Even for our industry, keeping it stable is the right thing to do. Sure.
Perhaps as a parting shot, Rand volatility, do you expect that to continue?
Undoubtedly. With everything that's happening globally that you've mentioned, we haven't heard a good story in terms of the Rand in a while. And it's not going to change anytime soon, because, the minute that literally we put our head out of the water, there's another story that comes through globally that has a negative impact on it, and it's going to be interesting to monitor it, for the rest of the year. But I anticipate that it will remain just as volatile.
Lebogang Gaoaketse is from Wesbank. Thank you very much for your thoughts on what we can expect later this afternoon. 3 o'clock is the usual time that the Reserve Bank governor makes or announces that all-important decision. Let's take